Kashimo is going to body Sukuna very soon. And I really do mean very soon. It's happening in the coming chapters. Ever since Yorozu added that new rule where players can now transfer between any of the colonies, Kashimo can come anytime and he can come very easily. And in this video, I'm going to break down just how that fight is going to go and how much of a menace Kashimo is going to be. So trust me, you're definitely not going to want to miss this one. And of course, if you do like JJK content, I would really recommend subscribing to the channel. Trust me, there are a ton of JJK videos on this channel, power scaling, what ifs, versus battles, and a ton of live streams too, live reactions and reviews. So if you're a fan of JJK, you're not going to regret it. It's much appreciated. And leaving a like does help too. If you do, thank you. Thank you very much. And lastly, thank you to all of the honored one and special crew members of the channel, the Worst Box and that guy Trey. Thank you guys very much. Okay, now before I actually get into when this is going to happen, how this is all going to go down, and just what is going to happen to Yorozu as well, she is a very important piece to all of this. Let me actually explain why this curse technique is so powerful. We know that the Kashimo that we see is his weakest form, and it's actually a case where some characters in JJK actually have several different forms. So for example, Todo has 2 and Yuta has 3, and of course you could actually argue Yuta has 4. Now of course Kashimo actually falls into the same category as Yuta in this case, but a bit differently. Now what do I mean by 3 different forms? Because I know a lot of people get confused when I say this. Well, Kashimo has his false base, or as most people call it, his just regular base. He has his true base of his curse technique, and he has his max power, his binding bow form, where he basically is using an amped version of his curse technique to make it several dozens of times stronger than it already is. Okay, so what's his regular base, or his false base as I like to say? That's the version that we got to see when he fought Hakari. So in this version, he's actually not using his base curse technique, and he's only using the characteristics of his curse energy, so the traits that it has of lightning, and he's using that trait to actually make the lightning strikes that he does, because basically when he attacks people, even defends people, he can actually transfer charges, and using the negative and positive charges between him and his opponent, he can actually make an unblockable guaranteed hit lightning strike that is just insanely destructive. I think it's one of the most powerful and lethal attacks we've ever seen in the series, and it really is terrifying to think that this is not a curse technique. This is just from the characteristics and traits of his actual cursed energy. Now we have his true base. Now this is not fully confirmed. I want to say that this is probably 95 to 98% confirmed. If it turns out to be wrong, well, I'm gonna look like a fool in the future, but what it means is that Kashimo actually has a regular curse technique that he's had his whole life that he's always used, and it was just a regular curse technique, like all the ones we see in JJK, such as Nanami's ratio curse technique or Meimei's bird curse technique, where she can control birds. Whatever his curse technique actually is, we'll get into that very soon. It doesn't actually matter, just know that he actually has a regular form of this. And unfortunately, unless we see a flashback of his, we will never see a true base Kashimo in the current series, and that is because he has actually changed his curse technique to make it an amped curse technique with binding vows, and this gets right into his third form, the maximum power, or the all or nothing Kashimo. Many people have many different names for this. Most people just say it's the curse technique Kashimo. What it means is that this version of Kashimo that we're currently seeing, he knows for a fact that he, even with his regular curse technique, stands no chance whatsoever against Sukuna. The reason he knows this is because we see in his flashback, Kenjaku even says, it's not even close, it's Sukuna. That's the strongest person I've ever seen. And Kashimo really even respects and is very aware of who Kenjaku is, as he even says, oh, I should have been fighting you. So when Kenjaku so firmly tells him that Sukuna is league stronger than him, or just the strongest, it makes just too much sense for Kashimo just to give himself a fighting chance to actually place binding vows on his curse technique to make it much stronger. So of course, when he would have done this isn't too clear. Would he have done this just before he made the contract with Kenjaku, so after the flashback, or is this something he would have done after he incarnated, and then he just, as soon as he was reborn into a vessel, he just made these binding vows on his curse technique to prepare the fight against the king of curses, Ryomen Sukuna. I don't know why he gave Sukuna such a title drop, but I gotta respect him. I gotta respect everything he's doing right now. It's crazy. So then this would make a lot of sense. So one of the binding vows that we know for a fact is that he has placed a binding vow to make this a one-time curse technique. And the thing about binding vows in JJK works very similarly to Hunter x Hunter. The more you're offering, the stronger your binding vow will become. So for example, Nanami's binding vow of overtime is set so Nanami is actually at 80% of his overall cursed energy or power throughout the entire day, but in exchange, if he goes over the overtime of his work limit, he will actually be granted 120% of his power. So it's a pretty fair exchange. In exchange for losing 20% of his power throughout the day, he gains a boost of 20% if he hits that overtime. And just a fun fact, this actually does stack with his ratio technique, so when he's in overtime, that 1.2 times multiplier is affected by his curse technique's multiplier, and his other binding vow multipliers. I think if he actually hits you with his curse technique while he's in overtime, it's something like a 2.7 times damage increase. I talk about that in my How Strong is Nanami video. Just I want to let you know, binding vows really do increase your power, even smaller ones like that. Now just imagine if someone as strong as Kashimo is sacrificing his curse technique permanently, especially if it's a strong curse technique, best believe that is going to amp his curse technique for that one-time use several times over at the absolute bare minimum. And that's just one binding vow of many that it probably has. And I actually did ask the members of my channel just if they could give me their thoughts on this. So actually, Seven Sins, he actually says a curse technique is vital to a sorcerer's power, and the fact that he made it a one-time curse technique use means it'll be a all or nothing that'll amplify everything that he could already do. So pretty much he's spot on. And I want you to remember, the greater the sacrifice, the stronger the binding vow and the power. So of course someone strong sacrificing their curse technique forever, man, that is going to make it so much stronger for that one-time use. And here's the craziest part, some people actually believe it'll be a life sacrifice, so if he uses it, he'll burn away his life. And again, this is something I talked about in my Kashimo's curse technique video. It's actually one of my oldest JJK videos, I think one of the very first ones I ever made on this channel. I'm still really happy with it. Yeah, a lot of people seem to think it's for his life, and I do want you to remember, if it is a sacrifice for his life, this is going to be something even more phenomenal than we may even think it is, because that is just a tremendous sacrifice. Now, of course, some other binding vows that he may have placed on his curse technique is maybe a time limit. So this is only if his curse technique summons something or grants him a power-up or transforms him. So not if it's a one-time attack, which, by the way, if it's a one-time attack, that would really suck. I mean, it would look cool for a moment, but that would be pretty lame, I can't even lie. Granted, with GEGE's pacing, maybe he'll just throw it away for a one-time attack, but yeah, that would really suck if it just is that. But yeah, if it's something like, let's say, a transformation like Killua's Godspeed in Hunter x Hunter, or maybe if he summons an avatar, such as the Susanoo armor in Naruto, or maybe he actually wears some sort of armor that boosts him, or maybe he summons something like an electric Shikigami that's really powerful and it boosts him as well. Whatever it is, perhaps that he's also placed a time limit on this technique. So on top of the binding vows we've mentioned before, maybe he'll place like a 5 or 10 minute time limit on the technique, actually make it several times stronger than it already is of its other binding vows. If he does that as well, then that is just going to be monstrous, because now you're just stacking multipliers on top of each other. And I think it's actually becoming clear why people actually think that this curse technique form of Kashimo would actually body 15-fingered Sukuna pretty easily, and potentially even body 20-fingered Sukuna, which I actually, maybe that's a bit too far of how strong we've seen 15-fingered Sukuna and the exponential growth of each finger, but I do want to say, at the very least, 20-fingered Sukuna is a possibility, but at the very least, you'll give 15-fingered or 20-fingered Sukuna the fight of his life. And there could even be other binding vows, so maybe one could be revealing the information, which we've seen gives a minor boost, so your next attack would be like 1.10 increase. Like, there's a lot of smaller binding vows they could add on to it, and as we've seen, the multipliers do actually stack up with techniques and binding vows, so there's that as well. And the last thing I actually want to mention before I actually get into how this is all going to be implemented into the story is that it is possible that maybe he would actually get his domain expansion alongside his curse technique, because basically to actually use your domain expansion, you need to use your curse technique sure hit to actually hit someone. Now, it's not the case in all the time. This is pretty much kind of a golden standard, because the databooks actually did say that a domain expansion is just you using your strongest technique but allowing it to be a sure hit. So a great example of this is Mahito. So maybe it's possible the reason he hasn't casted a domain expansion yet is because to even use his domain expansion, you'd actually need to use a sure hit. Now, I'm actually of the belief that if he does have a domain expansion, he's actually just added that onto the binding vow. So it's not just his curse technique, but actually his domain expansion. So in exchange for having all of these binding vows and only using it one more time, his domain would also get amplified many times over and be way more refined or stronger. I think that's incredible, and it would be a great reason as to why someone of his caliber doesn't have a domain, which is even to this day very, very weird. Reverse curse technique can always be explained because that's less about you being strong, and that's actually more about just an understanding of cursed energy. Domain expansion has just never made sense, because that's something that's as clear as day, is actually just something based on how strong you are, and once you reach a certain level, you can just cast domain expansion. It's not as exclusive as reverse curse technique, so hopefully that would put that odd case of Kashimo not having a domain to rest. And to end off this section, we have the Eternal Flame, actually a great JJK YouTuber himself as well, almost 1K for him. He actually says that he was the strongest in his era, and he wasn't even acknowledged because of people like GOJO and Sukuna. I do want to say it's not confirmed, unlike Ryu Shigori, who we know for a fact was confirmed to be the strongest of his time. We don't know for sure if Kashimo was, but given the fact that he didn't die and he lived so long, he probably was as well. And he was a part of the same era as Ryu, but they were alive at separate times. So unfortunately, by the time Akari was actually at the end of his life and was an old man, Ryu had just started to make a name for himself and was actually entering his prime and finally making a name for himself. As a matter of fact, Kashimo had only just learned about Ryu as he was dying. He didn't even have enough time left, as we see in the flashback he's coughing up blood, to actually even go and challenge Ryu, because he was just dying at that time. So Kashimo really is just something else. And if you've been enjoying the video, hey, be sure to subscribe. It's much appreciated, and a like would be awesome too. Thank you very much. Okay, now to get into how this is all going to happen in the story. His involvement with Ryomen Sukuna, the king of curses, right? Top dog, who everyone just loves right now. And of course, Yorozu, or as I like to say, Yorozu. I know I'm saying it wrong, but I just like to say it like that. Anyway, now that we know transfer between colonies is possible, Kashimo can very easily just roll up to Sendai and challenge Sukuna. Now again, I know a lot of people are saying, how do you know he's in Sendai? Now it's very, I guess the best way to say is not clear how this works, but remember before Yuji had even declared himself as a player of the Culling game, it had actually counted Yuji as a Culling game player, if you remember back in the Hakari arc, because Sukuna was a part of the contracts and decided to be a player way back when. It's very interesting because we've seen of all of the sorcerers, so Registar, Ryu Shigori, Uro, or Kashimo, it doesn't show the name of their vessel, vessels, but rather their actual names that they have. However, for cases like Itadori and Hana, because they're the ones in control, it actually showcases their names. So obviously that's why Kashimo couldn't find Sukuna, because Yuji was in control. It would say Yuji Itadori. Well, Hana is in control, so it wouldn't say the angel. That's why they couldn't locate the angel, even though her name's just Angel. Now I think you see where I'm going with this. If it's whoever's in charge of the vessel or the body is the one whose name is being showcased, then right now, because Sukuna is actually the one in charge of the Megami body, it wouldn't say Megami's name, it should actually say Ryomen Sukuna as the player. And since players can actually track where players are and find their information because Kashimo added that rule, you know what that means. Kashimo can very easily just search Ryomen Sukuna, where is he? Oh, it says he's in Sendai because that information is disclosed, and there we go. He can transfer as well because of Yorozu's rule. I mean, there we go. It's pretty simple as well. And also there is a lot of time for Kashimo to actually move to Sendai, even though it is a bit far. It's not too far, thankfully. It's not the furthest colony, but it's not exactly the one right next door either. We know that Sukuna did take his time to actually roll up to Yorozu, and the reason we know this is because he actually casually took a stroll down all of Sendai, and that's why Ryu was actually able to stand in his way. But at the very least, even if it wasn't a long walk, right, maybe it did take a bit of time to get to the Yorozu fight, and as the Yorozu fight is going to take place, because that's been going on for a bit and it's probably going to take a bit more longer, that's going to give ample time for Kashimo to actually roll up. And now if you've seen my Yorozu video recently, I actually am of the belief that Yorozu might end up on Sukuna's side. How this is going to happen, I wasn't too sure, but I just know it would be very odd if GEGE introduced her 5 chapters ago just to die right now. I mean, I guess she would serve her purpose, which is just to showcase 15-fingered Sukuna with the 10 shadows and all that, and I wouldn't put it past GEGE for killing a character that he introduced right off the bat. I mean, hey, it's GEGE AKUTAMI, he kills everyone pretty easily, so maybe he would, but it would be pretty interesting if somehow Yorozu ends up on Sukuna's side, because again, she does have such an affinity for him, and Sukuna would most likely just use her by any means necessary. She could actually end up as a final villain in the final arc. Okay, but why am I talking about all this? Well, I actually think that Kashimo is going to interrupt this Sukuna and Yorozu fight, and he's going to be the one who makes them team up, because Kashimo is going to be bodying Sukuna so badly, and I get Sukuna's so strong, but you've heard why I think Kashimo with his curse technique is going to be so powerful. Besides it just narratively, that's the whole point of him existing, right? The whole build up for his curse technique, the whole hype behind it, and with the evidence I've given, yeah, he's going to be doing numbers. It might be possible that Yorozu will save Sukuna or back him up at the last minute in some way, or maybe sneak attack Kashimo or help Sukuna in that fight, and that is actually what's going to get him to that side. And actually this goes into Trigger's comment. From a story writing perspective, it only makes sense for him to be capable of fighting 15-fingered Sukuna, since there's very few others who can. And he also says it wouldn't make sense to have him alive and to build up all of this narrative writing just for him to get one shot by Sukuna. And he just summed it up perfect. This would be the best explanation on giving Yorozu an actual role for the end of the story, and it would make sense on how the fight doesn't end with one of them killing each other, and it just makes sense overall. I mean, now you can see his name, and Sukuna just finally entered the Sendai colony because he wasn't in a colony before while he was taking the bath, so now it would make sense that this is the time that Kashimo's tracking him, now that he can be visible and be seen in a colony. So yeah, I do think that is just how it's gonna go, and like I said in the title or the thumbnail, whichever one I've put this in, he is going to body, he's going to destroy and bully 15-fingered Sukuna and Yorozu. Obviously he's not going to kill Sukuna whenever the time limit comes out, or Sukuna does something dirty, or maybe it's just not enough, or Yorozu helps him in the end. Oh, come on, Kashimo's not going to end the series right here. We all know Yuji's final fight is going to be with Sukuna, or maybe even GOJO, but at the very least, narratively, it's been written that Yuji's final clash, and just to end things off, it's Sukuna. That's his opponent. But even if it's not Yuji, you know, we got to get the GOJO versus 20-fingered Sukuna. That's also an option. And the honored one member of the channel, the Wustwop, he says he actually agrees with everyone here. Can't be the outer-verse Lakari, but narratively, he has the best shot to take down Sukuna. And here's an interesting point he said. While he's fighting Sukuna, maybe the gang tries to get Angel and use her to get away to release GOJO. And this would actually make sense. Now that Sukuna is fighting Yorozu, and if Kashimo actually stalls him even longer, this is the perfect chance to actually attack Kenjaku and get the front of the prison, which maybe they don't need since Shoso has the back. But at the very least, if GOJO would be freed out of the front, it'd probably be best to free him while Sukuna isn't around Kenjaku, so GOJO wouldn't just get jumped by Sukuna and Kenjaku. Well, Kenjaku wouldn't do much, but Sukuna, you know. So maybe that's the reason why. Maybe they actually just want to get the front of it and use Angel at that time to fully unseal GOJO, which is a great theory. I didn't actually think about that. It's a perfect chance to do something with Kenjaku with the front of the prison run. Okay, if you've watched this far and you still aren't subscribed, I really would recommend subscribing. Trust me, I got a ton of JJK videos just like this one on the channel. Live streams, versus battles, power scaling, just a whole bunch of stuff, analysis. You aren't gonna regret it. And of course, if you did enjoy the video or liked anything I had to say throughout the video, a like is much appreciated too. It really does help out. Thank you. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I reply to almost every single comment, or at the very least, I'll give you a little heart too, so you know that I've read it. So hey, let me know if you have anything to say. Is Kashimo going to body Sukuna, or is Sukuna going to body Kashimo? And what's Yorozu's role going to play in all of this? And of course, thank you to all the members of the channel. We have a lot of new members recently, so thank you. See your name on the screen. It's much appreciated. You guys are absolute legends. Thank you very much. But that's all. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.